But I got a new lav mic, so hopefully starting on Friday from that point on, the sound quality of this will be a little bit better no matter where I am in this whole situation. I wanted to revisit this really quickly because we are going to get away from this in a heartbeat in just a second. But you guys remember what we were looking at here? This was our RGB color space. Everybody still familiar? We're still hung on long enough to remember this part, right? We're good about this? Are there any questions about this? However, there is a problem with this, and the problem with this is a significant problem with this, and I'm sure you guys have experienced this as well, is every time that you actually use anything to actually change color in this space, so if we put a curve, for instance, on everybody, is anybody in this room not familiar with curves in Photoshop? We've all gotten that far? I guess that wouldn't, I guess a 2.5 and all that kind of stuff would imply that you know curves, right? Okay, so. But the problem, and I think you know this in Photoshop, is that whenever you put a curve on something and you actually decide, okay, I'm going to go to the red channel, I need a little bit more red. It actually lightens the image. Or I need a little bit less red, it actually darkens the image. So it's impossible to change color without changing tone. Those two are inextricably connected to one another. And that makes doing really finessed color correction extremely difficult to do. It also makes translating between all of these color spaces that we're talking to virtually impossible. So even though this is the system that we use once we get into Photoshop, it's not the system that we use previous to that. So when we are working in Camera Raw, we are not working in this space at all. We are working in LAB color space. So I want to show you what that looks like. You've already seen them. You guys all remember looking at the color sync utility and having the cool little thing that you could actually move around. We were looking at Adobe RGB and we were looking at sRGB. You guys remember all of that, right? Those are all LAB spaces. I'm going to show you what LAB is really quickly because it matters to us that you know and you understand it. It's the trick that I used when I changed the color of the car. Let me jump out to something. You guys get the more advanced version of this. Aren't you glad I didn't do this to you? Or that? So this is what happens in LAB. And the advantage, there's several advantages to this. I'm going to try to get another slide up here really quickly. Yeah, I'm going to try to get this guy up as well. So when we look at this, again, this is a color wheel that's based on 3 primaries or 3 primaries plus 3 secondaries, no matter how you look at it. But everything needs 3 values in order to actually find you a color into this space. You need a value of red, green, blue, or you need a value of CMY to plot wherever you are in this space. So for instance, if I had simply a value of red and green, it would put me in this area, but how far up and down in this direction is controlled by the amount of blue. So I need 3 points to actually give me placement there in this RGB world. However, in a CMY, in an LAB world, this is actually what happens. So in an LAB world, just like that thing that you guys saw in the color sync utility part, what they have done is that they no longer deal with RGB primaries. They deal with HSB primaries, hue, saturation, and brightness. Does that make sense? So the brightness axis is going here from the top down to the bottom. And then instead of having 3 points around here to determine color, you only have 2. You have an A axis right here, and you have a B axis right here. The B axis is always the easiest one to remember. It's the blue, and you know the opposite, the complementary blue. The complement of blue is yellow. And then in the terms of this other axis going over here, this is actually the green. Now sometimes people refer to this as magenta. Sometimes people refer to this as red. But it's simply this axis that goes along here. Have you guys ever seen or worked in this space yet in your life? Say what? Be brave. You work with it every single day. You work with it all the time, and you just don't know it. And that's why I want to show this to you. So I need everybody to go to, I'm just going to grab an image. We can go for the very same image that we actually had worked with, the girl in the woods. So if you go to class 2, in the student folder. Again, that very top folder, the 201003227 underscore woods, that one, and just the very top one, it's a girl laying in the woods, and there's a color card that's actually in that photograph. So, has anybody ever been in this space before? I know you guys are all thinking, all right, this guy is trying to trick me up. I'm not saying anything ever again. I'm just going to sit here, mum, hopefully pray he doesn't ever call on me. All of you guys have been here before, haven't you? This is Camera Raw. I don't mean this place. I don't mean here in the woods. I meant this place, Camera Raw. Is this new to anybody? And what do you guys do when you get in here to Camera Raw? Just give me an idea. Because today is partly about this. You develop your files, right? And what do you do? How do you start?
I start with profile corrections.
Okay, so you start with your profile thing first. And they've actually made that #1 now. It didn't ever used to be that way. But you start here, this is where you begin with, right? And so you pick a profile and you try to get something that actually looks relatively good, right? So last time when we were all together, we learned how to make those profiles, right? To make very specific ones. You guys remember all that? Good, because we're doing more of them today. Then what do you do?
I go to the camera icon. I forget what it is, but it's like auto adjustments for your camera and your lenses.
Okay. Do you guys all do that? You know about auto lens correction, chromatic aberration? Do we know all about that? Okay, well, we're going to learn about that. Then what do you do? Do you do that for every fucking picture you take?
I just do like a batch select on the left.
Yeah, I
but
get
there's
that part,
there's an action for it.
So we're going to make that permanent. Now, we're going to make, if you're not doing this, if you're not using automatic lens corrections, I personally think that's a little nuts. I would think it would help you out. But the idea of having to go to that little box every single time I open the file, shoot me in the head now. I'm going to instead, I would hire one of you guys and make you do it for me. Now, you just changed the whole behavior of the program. So we'll look at that in just a second. Next thing.
White balance.
White balance. And how do you white balance?
Depends on the picture, but I'll usually try to shoot something with gray or white in it.
Okay. And then you use the targeting white balance tool. Is that what you guys do as well? You have a gray card in it. That part also works. What if you don't have any of that stuff in there? Do you ever use these little sliders right here to make it different colors? Everybody does. Everybody looks at it and says, okay, well, I need this to be a little bit warmer. And they crank it up like this. Sorry. When my hands get sticky, as in, okay, so that makes it way warmer. And, oh, yeah, I love that. That's really cool. I'm really into yellow skin tones now. But that's kind of what you do, right? No? Who does anything else? Maybe that's a better way of putting it. It's how most of you deal with all of these things, right? And then you go down to the next part and you say, okay, exposure, well, I need it to be a little bit brighter. Oh, no, that's too bright. I need it to be a little bit darker. Oh, no, that's a little too bright. And then you start screwing around with contrast. You start doing all of those things, right? Does the lightness in here change the color? Does the exposure here change color? Once you've set color, does this change color? No. It does not change color, but look at what we have got here. Remember the LED thing we just looked at? This right here is L. This controls your lightness and your brightness. This is the blue axis. This is the red axis. You guys have been using LED for the last 15 years. As long as you've been using Camera Raw or Lightroom, either one, you're working in LED. Does that make sense? And again, the advantage of doing this is that you can work on color independent of brightness. Right? I can make things more saturated, less saturated. I can push the curve, I can push the hue around, I can change the hue without having any impact on the brightness of that image at all. So, everybody open up the red car. Do me a favor, you can cancel this guy out. Everybody open up the red car for me really quickly. Again, that'll be back in the files from our first class. Now, in this case, I asked all of you this before. When you look at the very top of your screen up here, do you see RGB or LAB? LAB. So I'm going to get you to change it really quickly because I never should have given you the LED version. I should have given you the RGB version. So I want you to come up to the image menu, down to mode, and change that from LAB to RGB. And then you should see RGB sitting right up here at the top. Can you guys tell me what the heck is going on at the top up there? What's the 8? Exactly, it's the bit depth of the image. Do we all remember what bit depth is? Right? We talked about that. It's the actual number of tones that are available to you. So if you have to calculate 8-bit ever, it's strictly the number of 2s that you use, and it works like this. If you have a 1-bit image, it's 2 options. You have 2 tones. If you have a 2-bit image, here I'm going to actually change this. I'm just going to call it the number of 2s. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I have 8 2s here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. Right? So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is 32, times 2 is 64. Times 2 is 128, times 2 is 256. This is a 256-bit image. That's how it happens. Again, no matter what, if I've got a 2-bit image, I've always got a black and I've always got a white. I'm not expanding my range, it's just how many nuanced tones I've got in between. I've always got a black and I've always got a white. But in an 8-bit image, I've got 253 tones in between that black and that white. Or 254 tones between that black and white. Does that make sense to everyone? If you keep doing this, so I'm going to keep doing this, times 2, that's 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. At 14-bit, you have, okay, so we were at 256 times 2 is 512 times, okay, so that's, hang on. Okay. I'm not only dyslexic, there's all sorts of weird eye-hand things that I run into, whatever. It's why I'm a photographer and not a mime. Okay, wait, so I was at 5, I was at 8. That's 256, right? Okay, so 9-bit is 512, 10-bit is 1024, then 11-bit is 2048. The next bit, which takes me to 12. So can somebody just do this with a calculator? Yeah, keep going. Anyway. Anybody? Okay, here, I'll show you what it is.
Is it 14?
I'm going to show everybody, so you'll just see the whole scale. this is what it is. So if you're doing grayscale, again, we're just talking about the same bit depth that we were talking right here. By the time you get up to 14-bit, it's 16,384 tones exist between black and white. So anyway, this is what your camera can capture. By the time you actually get up to 16-bit, it's over 65,000 tones between black and white. Again, you don't get a black or black, you don't get a white or white, it's just a number of little bitty increments that are going on in between the two. Does that make sense to everyone? So your camera's capturing, usually most cameras, there are medium format cameras now that are actually capturing in 16-bit. You can actually work in 32-bit in Photoshop. Photoshop has the capacity to do that. It's over 4 trillion tones between black and white. It's really crazy, right? Why would you want to do that? Yeah. I have no idea.
Would it show up like online, like if you were making
No. No, there's nothing in the world that can ever show you that. You can't see it, it's mathematical, pure and simple. What some people will do, and if you guys want to get into that, I can show it to you. What some people will do is they will actually use 32-bit in HDR. Is anybody in here shooting HDR? Sorry. That's some cute little Chinese woman in New York trying to sell them something. She thinks I speak Chinese. So in HDR, because it is such an expansive dynamic range, you can actually do work in 32-bit and have it remain smoother, is basically what it boils down to. I can show you an example of what the extreme tone correction does and why you would want to use it, and at least a higher bit depth, higher than 8-bit that we work in. Does this sort of make sense to everybody, what's kind of going on here? So the bit depth part matters. But I always show this to everybody. I love this part right here. So this is grayscale. It's one channel only. When you go to RGB, in this case, whatever, it's 3 of these. So you multiply this 2 times 2 times 2, and that's where the 8 comes from. Or the 4 times 4 times 4 times 4, 3 times whatever is what you get here, because you've got 2 of these in every single channel, and you've got 3 of these channels. Does that sort of make sense? So I always say this to anybody, if anybody can actually come up and tell me what that number is, I will, I said no extra credit. If you can tell me what that number, if you can really say what this number is, I'll give you extra credit on something. Yeah. Isn't it, this is nuts though, Photoshop can actually function in this world, right? And it's like, yeah. Okay. So at any rate, going back to this, is everyone here comfortable with this whole idea that... So did you get the car open, right? Okay, so we're in RGB. This is 8-bit right now. We are going to then change it back to lab. This is how you would actually convert the image. So up to image menu, down to mode, and come down to LAB. Now, if you want to come off knowing like you know what you're talking about, you always refer to this as LAB. Nobody refers to this as lab. It's no more lab than RGB is. And if you said nobody would, they would just look at you and go, you're an idiot, right? It's the same thing. People in the know understand that LAB is LAB, it's not lab. So don't call it that. Okay, at any rate. So this is how I actually did the car correction and what's going on. If we put a curve on this guy, so again, for you people who were used to the adjustment panel that exists right here in the middle, and remember I told you you don't need that guy anymore, I need the screen real estate. I'm much more concerned about seeing a big properties panel than I am seeing an adjustment window in here taking it. If you click on this little icon at the bottom of your layers palette, the thing that looks like a little it's sort of half dark circle, half light circle, you will get a fly-out menu to come up, and every single adjustment that you used to have is sitting right here, and it's also done in the exact same order. So here's the brightness, contrast control, levels and curves, hue, saturation, color balance, photo filter, color lookup, all of that stuff is exactly the same. Now there's a couple of things in here that you don't have, that you do have in an RGB world. Vibrance is one, for instance, and it is because Vibrance does not have a viable alternative in an LAB world because of the way LAB works. Make sense? But at any rate, so I'm just going to simply put a curve on this guy. And you'll see when the curve goes on here, if you look up in your properties window, that the first channel that you've got up in here is lightness. And so one of the advantages of using lightness, because let me ask you this guys as well, because this is another perversion of RGB. When you guys go to actually add contrast, you can use a curve band contrast, right? Is everybody sort of familiar with that? What is contrast?
Isn't it like the bright or
What I think, yeah, what we're sort of like talking about doing is that if we were to add contrast, what we would be doing would we would be making the darks darker and the lights lighter, correct? If we were to take away contrast, we would be making the lights darker and the darks lighter. And that's how we get to like flat stuff, right? But when you do that in Photoshop, that would change the color as well. Massively. And the harder you hit the contrast, the worse it becomes, right? Now, some of you would argue that, well, I can use blending modes to restrict that contrast and the curve, whatever, to only affect the tones. However, what that's really going on is it's an imitation of what happens in LAB. And doing it in LAB is actually much more effective. So if we look at contrast here, you can simply put a point down here sort of towards the bottom and click and drag it down. It makes the darks darker. And click and pop this up, it makes the lights lighter. But we haven't affected the color of the car at all. Does that sort of make sense? So, but anyway, if you've done that, tear the points off here because I don't want those guys to stay on here. So I'm going to tear those guys off. Instead, I'm going to go down and look at my colored channels. So you remember the A channel right here, if we go back and take a look, if we look at our A channel right here, it is what is controlling the axis that goes between green and red. B channel is between blue and yellow. Just to remind you guys of what's going on. Again, the way to remember that is the B stands for blue, then you know the A has got to be the opposite one. All right. So I'm going to go to the A channel. This is my green-red or my green-magenta, depending on how you want to put it. And I'm simply going to invert it. And in inverting it, what I'm saying is, by inverting it, I want everything that's red to be green. It's just that simple. So I'm going to grab the base point down here at the bottom and drag it all the way up. And then I'm going to grab the top point up here and drag it all the way down. And I'm simply inverted the red color, and the car is now green. But look what's happened. I haven't impacted the tonal range at all. The luminosity of this image is unchanged. Make sense? So later on in this class, we get into recoloring clothes. We get into recoloring. You can recolor anything. I just use clothes as an example. Are you finally warm? I am like sweating still. It's like, could they have told us that the only way to get into the Art Institute was on Monroe? Maybe. I don't know. All right, does this make sense? Are there questions about this? All right, you can close this guy up. Guys, we're not dealing with tons of color today. I want as much hands-on today as we can possibly do today. So as soon as I get through a little bit more of this, we are going to go grab cameras. Did you guys get my email yesterday or the announcement yesterday by any chance in time to bring a USB cable? It's a very specific kind if you have one. If you don't have one, I think I actually managed to find like a few of my own, so I brought those. They've got like 5 or 6 of them in the cage for us, and then they may have a couple more here. My big worry is that do you guys have an adapter that takes like a regular old style USB to go into your computer? Okay, hopefully for anyone who doesn't have one, they have promised me that they've got all sorts of adapters in the cage up here. So what I want to get out, what I want to happen today, if I possibly can, is I want to fire capture one up on your computers. Did you guys get a chance to download that program yet? Okay, if you haven't, we'll take a quick look at that because I want you to go ahead and download it. We're going to fire it up today. I want to introduce you to Capture One today using a camera, and I also want to put the color card into there. I want you guys to see this process. I want you to experience this process, okay? We're going to find someplace inside the building to do this. We're not going to, oh, let's take this all outside. No, not going to happen. So I grew up. Okay, but we need to get through one last thing in terms of color. And it has to do with color temperature. Well, it is what it is. So in our conversation 2 days ago, I asked you guys about color temperature, and people seemed very much on the fence about that. But if you go back, and again, if you can open up that raw file for me one more time, that Girl in the Woods file. And you'll see here that unfortunately, I think that this is a mistake. It shouldn't be this way, but this is the way they have done this, is that Adobe has actually renamed the A and the B channel right here. These are the LAB channels, but they've renamed them. And they call this top one temperature, and they call the bottom one temp. This is actually a carryover from the days of film, when people actually refer to it the same way. So for all, does anybody in here ever shoot transparency film, positive film? So in shooting positive film, you guys know that there are, you have to buy film that is actually balanced for either tungsten or it's balanced for daylight. Those are all color temperature issues. And there's filters that you can actually use to modify that. So if you've got daylight balanced film and you're shooting indoors at night with incandescent light, there's a blue filter that you can put on there. It's actually called the name of it doesn't matter so much. It's an ADB, I think is what it is. But they're called light balancing filters, LB. Then there are other situations where you can actually change the color of light, and those are called, again, they're going to be color temperature. They would be called, do you guys do any gel work with lights in the studio yet? Some work in there. Well, there's warming gels and there's cooling gels. The warming gels would be called CT. Wow, this is so bad. CTO and CTB. CTO would be color temperature orange. CTB would be color temperature blue. This is all a carryover from that. But the truth of the matter is, this is actually the A channel down here, and this is the B channel right here. I wish they would call it that. But nonetheless, the B channel does refer to color temperature, and we need to look at color temperature. And then we're done with color. Well, not done, but. So, this would be considered a relatively good color temperature scale. It's within the limits of a projector right here. So, who in here has ever heard of color temperature? Who's ever heard of degrees Kelvin? Any idea what that means?
That's like going back to high school chemistry.
Yeah, let's leave the high school chemistry out because you're going to freak everybody else out on that one. So let's not talk about high school chemistry. Anybody else? Color temperature. Degrees Kelvin. Okay, how about degrees Fahrenheit? Like it's 1,000,000 degrees Fahrenheit out right now, right? So for everybody from the US, it's Fahrenheit. For the whole rest of the world, it's Celsius. But basically, you're talking about temperature, right? And it's just a scale, right? So if you're in the US, water freezes at 32 degrees, water boils at 212. If you're on a Celsius scale, it freezes at 0 degrees, it boils at 100 degrees. Far simpler way of doing it, but anyway, the US is never mind. So they're just scales, but they describe the exact same thing, right? So what's the difference? How come an ice cube is an ice cube and boiling water is boiling water? I mean, what's the difference? It's both water.
Temperature.
It's the temperature, right? But what's really going on behind the scenes is it's the amount of energy that's actually inside that. So going back a little bit, this will be the deepest science lecture I will give, I swear. There's molecules that make up all of us. They make up all matter. They make up water. And molecules move. And they bump into one another. And that's just how they are. If you start to remove energy from them by cooling things down, they move less. If you start to put energy into them by heating them up, they move much more. As a matter of fact, a microwave works by actually making them move a whole lot more. It puts more energy into them, they get hotter. And so you would think, well, that is an infinite scale. You can always put more energy in. And to a certain extent, that's true. But can you always take more energy out? No. Eventually, you take all the energy out. And what happens is the point where you've taken all the energy out, there is no movement at all. There's no molecular movement at all. And as a consequence of that, that object is the theoretical purest black thing that exists in the universe. Because it has no energy. That is 0 degrees on a Kelvin scale. There's a guy called Kelvin. You guys could do your own scale, you know that, right? Just come up with a range and say, okay, I'm going to do the Bursar scale. But anyway, it's the Kelvin scale. At one end is 0 movement, and that is 0 degrees Kelvin. And you can't get any colder than that. You can't get any darker than that because it has no energy by definition. Does that make sense, everyone? So you take this thing, it's called a theoretical black body. It's still theoretical, but the scientists actually have gotten within like a millionth of a degree of actually absolute zero. So that's, anyway. You take that body and you start to warm it up. You start to add energy to it. And you keep adding energy to it and you make it warmer and you make it warmer. And by the time you get up to about 2000 degrees Kelvin, it starts to glow. This black body starts to glow. But it glows with a really warm temperature, a very yellowy colored light. This would be like candlelighty kind of color, right? As you continue to warm, to add more energy up, when you get around 3000 degrees Kelvin, it sort of starts to take on a less sunsetty part, and it becomes, this is really more where we have our incandescent lights exist in this area right here. Does that make sense? If you keep adding more energy and more energy and more energy, by the time we get up to like 9000 degrees Kelvin, this is the color of your MacBook when it comes out of the box, fresh from Apple. The color is so incredibly blue, and the reason they make it so incredibly blue is it makes your images look really, really, really contrasty and saturated. But it has no resemblance at all to what the real color of your images should be. Apple didn't design these things for people like you. They designed it for 14-year-old Instagrammers and little ladies who are making videos of their dogs. I have a girlfriend she's been a girlfriend here, and I tried to find her once, and all I could find were videos of her dog. Anyway, nonetheless, if you're a mountain climber and you climb Mount Everest and you get to the top of Mount Everest on an incredibly clear day where there's not a single cloud in the sky, you actually end up with a color temperature up here around 12,000 degrees Kelvin, and this can continue to go on. So you can see at this range right in here, it's extremely blue. This range down here is extremely yellow. Aren't these the two opposites of one another? Aren't these complementary colors of one another, yellow and blue? So what happens in the very middle? They're neutralized out. You have no color. Completely desaturated, neutral gray, right? That happens right here at 6,500 degrees Kelvin. How many people in this room have ever heard that 6,500 degrees Kelvin is daylight balance? How many people in here, clearly a lot of people in here have never calibrated a monitor, because you have to know what white point you want for your monitor, and it's always 65 degrees Kelvin, and the reason it is because this is neutral gray. This is an even balance between the warmth that happens down here and the coolness that happens up here. Does that make sense to everyone? Are we good on this part? I'm sorry, what?
Can you just repeat that last sentence?
So what's happening here is, again, warm area here, blue area here. These are complementary colors of one another. So if we look at this on the color wheel, you have, it's this blue in here. It's actually not exactly here. It's a little bit more copped off, but nonetheless. You got your blue area here, and you got your warmer area right in here. And the two balance one another out right here in the middle, and that is about 6,500 degrees Kelvin, where those two balance out. And so it's neutral. It's not warm, it's not cool. It's neither one. It's neutral. And that's what we want to use as a white point when we actually do a balancing a monitor calibration. That is what you want your monitor to be. You do not want your monitor to be warm. You don't want it to be cool. You want it to be neutral. And so when we go to do a calibration, we make it 6,500 degrees Kelvin. That's one of the things we particularly decide to do. Make sense to everyone? Okay, so I'm going to show this to you. I'm actually going to calibrate my monitor right now. I'm going to show you the process. I've already spoken to you guys about this before. This is What we're doing now is this part right here. Remember, we did our profile for our cameras to get it into Camera Raw or to Lightroom or to C1 Pro as a neutralized color with no bias based on the camera sensor. Well, we can bring it then into Photoshop. This is a theoretical mathematical space, so nothing, this is just a place to exchange these profiles. This space is constant for everyone, so it allows us to trade files back and forth without there being any change in color. And then we are now going to make this profile right here for this monitor. Every monitor needs its own profile. You cannot do a profile for this computer. If that computer is the exact same version, to use the profile you built for this on that would be absolutely pointless. Does that make sense? Every device is unique, and you need to get rid of the bias of every unique device. Are we good on that part? Okay. From day one, what controls your black point on your screen? Environment, right? The darker the environment, the clothes you wear, the color of the walls, that's what controls black point. I also asked you what controlled white point, and white point is controlled by the brightness of your monitor. So these are the things that we need to establish. Does that sort of make sense? Okay, so with that in mind, so here's instructions on how to do this guy. And I would beg every single person in this room to please calibrate your monitor on your laptop. How often should you calibrate your monitor? Well, again, I told you guys, the people at Pixar have to do it every single day or they're fired. There's a little note in here about how to find the software to actually use this hardware puck. The software is free, so you're not stealing anything. You just download the software, leave it on your computer, and actually work it out on here. So who is here has never seen a monitor calibration be done? Okay, then stand up. I just want you to look and see what we've got going on here. Or come over here, because I can't show this, I can't get this up on the screen. I'm going to get the software part up, but I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with what is actually going on here. So crowd around. Now, there's different calibrators that exist. This is an i1. In my estimation, this is actually the best one. i1 also makes a thing called Color Monkey. It's cheaper than this. I don't think it does as good a job, personally. I think it actually ends up being a little bit on the warm side, which I don't like. I'm just throwing this out there in case you ever decide that you're going to get your own. There is another company that actually makes these things called Spider. It's not affiliated with X-Rite. X-Rite has bought everybody damn near in the world out who does color work except for Spider. So I can't tell you whether Spider is good, bad, or not. What I can just say is that these are the people that everybody I know uses, and this is the one everybody uses. So as long as you're here at the Art Institute, you have access to this. You can come in, you'll see it doesn't take long to actually do this process. So people say, how often should you do this? And this is my feeling. Number one, you should just start off and have a base, and you should just work with that part in the beginning, always. But the only time, you don't need to color correct this stuff to surf the web. You don't need to have perfect color when you're actually typing out emails. You don't need it. That's not when you need it. You need it when you are going to do some really serious, critical color correction work. That's when you need this. Or if you are shooting in the studio, tethered, which is what I am going to show you guys how to do today, and we are going to continue to do throughout the semester. When you're shooting tethered, a lot of people are looking at that screen and they are making judgments based on what they see on that screen. If that screen is lying to them, then they're making value judgments based on a lie. And that is hugely problematic. So you need your input systems when you are making those judgments, when you're judging color, judging tone, judging contrast, all of those issues, you need your information to be honest. You need it to be real and not lying to you. Make sense? All right, so anyway, this thing plugs into a USB port, and I always suggest you plug it in before you start the software. Sometimes the software, it expects to see this thing, and if it doesn't see this thing, things can get wonky. So I always plug it in to begin it before I actually start anything. Then the application is actually called i1. And it's right here. You can see when you open this thing up, there's an i1 tray. I've never known what the i1 profiler tray is. But I'm going to double click on the i1 profiler. This is actually the same software that we'll use. We'll use a different piece of hardware to do our print profiles, but it's the same software, it's just a different piece of hardware. So you can see up here, I'm going to get a note saying, you know, you should really install this update. If I were you, I would go ahead and install the update, but I'm not going to do that for us right now because it will. I don't want to spend the time doing that. You'll see over here that you've got a series of options to actually profile. You can profile projectors, you can profile printers, you can profile scanners. So who shoots film here and scans? This is where, if you're scanning film, this would be a place where you could go in and build a profile for your scanner. So at any rate, I'm going to do a display here, and I'm going to click on doing display. Actually, I'm going to go back to that, close this up really quick, and open it again. Yeah. There's two versions of this right here in the beginning. There is a basic and an advanced version. I would suggest you guys, until you're really, really comfortable with this, you can move into the advanced if you really know what you're doing and there's a reason you feel like you really want to do that. But you don't need to do that. Basic will get you where you want to go. Okay, so I am going to click on display profile because that's what we're actually doing. In this case, for me, I have two options, and the reason I have two options here is that that projector is connected to this computer, and it's wanting to know, do you want to do the projector or do you want to do your laptop? And so I'm going to pick my color LCD to do my laptop because that's actually what I want to do. I'm also going to choke this window back a little bit so you can take a look right here. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my color LCD. That's the one I'm actually going to do. You can leave this as RGB LE color. There's a drop-down menu here that would allow you to change certain things. We don't need to do that. But this guy right here, what this stands for, this is this CIE Illuminate, and in this drop-down part, and you see that I have different versions of it, and the one that comes on by default is D65. What would you think D65 meant? Daylight 65, 100 degrees Kelvin. Exactly what we just looked at and said on the color temperature Kelvin scale, what is neutral? It is 6,500 degrees Kelvin. So that's the white point that we are going to actually pick for this. Luminance right down here is how bright is your screen. So there's variations on this. You can even do custom versions of this. My advice to you, and this is a number you just got to write down or remember or tattoo on the inside of your arm or the inside of your lip, but then you've got to go into the bathroom to flip it up to make sure you can read it right. And if they didn't do it right for being in a mirror and upside down, then you're reading the wrong number and it's like, is that an H? No. Anyway, it's the range that you want to be in for your luminance is between 120 and 140 candelas per square meter. So don't get all flipped out about candelas per square meter. You don't need to remember that. I'm never going to ask you that name. But that's what that actually stands for. So your brightness or the luminance of your screen between 120 and 140. The next thing down is, and we may get into this at a certain point in this class, I'm not certain, but gamma is actually a contrast curve on your screen. It controls the contrast of your screen, and in this case, you would always want to leave that at a 2.2. Okay, so the three things that you need to know when you calibrate. The first is your white point, D65. The second is your luminance, between 120 and 140 candelas per square meter. And then finally, your gamma on that is a 2.2. Are we good on this? Okay, one last thing, I'm going to show this and then you guys can go have a seat again, just so that you realize this is what's going on. So this part's all set up. However, there's one really nasty option that you've got here, and it's this little thing right here. Adjust the profile based on my ambient light. And what that does is it takes your camera, and if a room is lighter, it tries to make an adjustment in the profile for the room being too light. If the room gets too dark, it also tries to adjust it. You're basically saying, I want to lock down my system, but I'm going to add this huge variable in there. Make sure this is unchecked. You do not want your profile varying. You want your profile to be one thing. And you would think that would be enough. Okay, I'm good. We're ready to go. You're not. You guys can all sit down now because I need you to do this on your computer right now regardless. So this is how I'll set it up, and you should be able to see how I put this puck on, and we'll get to that. I need everybody to come up to the Apple menu, come down to System Preferences. Are we good? Go to Displays. And again, I've got two displays right now because I've got one for my projector and one for my monitor right here. And in this, you see this little checkbox right here, automatically adjust brightness. That will completely fuck up your profile. You need to uncheck that and never check that again. If you need your screen brighter, you should be controlling that, not some engineer that was at Apple who decided he was going to make your life completely uncontrollable. Because imagine this happening. Imagine, unfortunately for you, you have to start doing editing in a relatively light room. And what ends up happening is that this automatic adjustment, it uses the camera and your computer. It says, okay, it's really light room, whatever. We need to make everything brighter. And so you're controlling your contrast, and you're doing all of that kind of stuff. You're making all these judgments, and everything is looking great, whatever. But then as the day goes on, the sun starts to set, your room gets darker, and all of a sudden this says, okay, well, the room's getting darker. We need to actually darken this. And so all of a sudden then you're looking at your image, and you're going, wait a minute, all my shadow detail just evaporated. I didn't change anything. It's because your computer is changing the brightness of your screen. So uncheck this, yes?
I also have an option for True Tone, which I don't see on here.
You have an option for what?
For True Tone.
Let me see what you got. Oh, I would turn that off as well. True Tone. Yeah. You want to shut off all this automatically control part. The other thing that you also want to shut off is this night shift. If you've got night shift on, what night shift actually does is that as the room gets darker, it actually changes the tint of your screen. It's a way to actually make what Apple thinks is a more, how do I put this? It makes it's what Apple feels like is going to be a more comfortable environment for your eyes. And I guess for watching movies, that'd be great, but for trying to do color work, this is awful. Is everybody good on this part? So you want to shut that part off as well. So once you get all of this done, I'm going to go back to this screen right here. So this is the last thing. So stand up really quickly just so that you guys can see this part. You don't have to come back over here again. You'll see what I'm talking about. So once this part is ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and click on Next. And I'm going to make this screen wider so that you can actually see it. And you remember that we were talking about how things worked with this, our color checker. And the way this thing worked when we used this software to build the profile for our camera is that these little patches are known values. And you take a picture of this with your camera, and your camera puts in its bias, whatever it is, and then we actually use the software, either the DNG profile editor or the Passport Color Checker software to measure what we got, what our camera actually gave us. And then whatever that bias is, whatever that discrepancy is canceled out by the profile that's built by this whole setup. Does that make sense? It works the same thing. What's going to happen here is you see these colors that exist right here, all of these colors. What's going to happen is that these are all known colors. The software knows what these colors are. So I'm going to put this hardware puck on my screen. The software is going to start firing these colors up onto my monitor. This thing is going to measure them and figure out if this is the color that's being asked for right here, is this the color that the screen is giving him? And if it isn't, how far off is that? And what do we need to do to build a profile to correct it so that when the software asks for this, the screen shows me this? Is everybody getting sort of comfortable with this process? Because it's the same for all color correction. When we get to printing, it will be the exact same thing. Are we good on this? Okay, so I'm going to click on Start Measurement. The software is really pretty good. It walks you through most of all of this. if it doesn't crash. So, this is what I want to show you. This thing is actually blinking like wild right now, and you're supposed to follow the directions. There is a protective cover on this. And so what this little illustration is telling you is to lift the top up, it releases it, spin it all the way around, and it will lock in place like this, and then this will go to your next screen. The next thing it'll tell you to do is to tilt your screen slightly backwards like this, because what you don't want to do, you want the puck to rest against your screen. If your screen is tilted too far this way, so if your screen is tilted like this, the puck can swing off of it and it'll swing free. It's not going to make contact with the screen. So it's just telling you that you really need to tilt that screen back. This little thing on the end, on the wire right here slides. All this is a counterweight so that it'll actually help hold this guy in place. You can see that when I uncovered that guy, there's a lens on here. I don't know about you guys, but whenever you go get rental stuff out of this or get that stuff out of the cage, you get lenses out of there. Do you guys check your lenses? I had somebody shooting a picture once, and she was like, I can't get the contrast in this right. I can't get the contrast in this right. It's just like, I can't get the contrast in this right. I said, let me see your lens. And it looked like she'd had lunch on it for the last year. Her lens, I swear to God, it was like looking through this. It was like looking through this screen. Anyway, so I'm going to say, yep, I understand exactly what you're talking about here. So I'm going to place this guy on my screen and let it rest. Make sure it makes contact like that. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK here, and then I'm simply going to hit next. So now what's going to happen is it's going to go through 3 passes. The first pass actually is going to go through 4, because the first is it's going to try to tell me how bright my screen is, and this is the first indication that comes up. And it says, okay, you wanted a brightness of 120. Your screen right now is measuring 161. My screen is too bright. My white point then is too bright. It's off. So if I'm trying to use this thing to actually do my editing to a print or to do anything like that, whatever, my screen is too bright. So I'm going to compensate for that by bringing my exposure down, because my screen is too bright. But then that, in truth, makes my real image too dark. Does anybody in here struggle with your images coming out and, God damn, it's way too bright, or it's way too dark, or it doesn't resemble your screen at all, and you get frustrated? This is a big culprit right here. The room that you're in is a big culprit, and this is the next one, because they are your white point and your black point. So I'm going to deal with this. This is the single most janky thing you are going to see in the entire 6 weeks of this class. And if I had a better way of doing it, I would do it. I don't. I've never seen it. Nobody's ever come up with a better way, so I'm just going to tell you this is how it works. Apple, in their infinite wisdom, has the cutest little icons for making your screen brighter and darker. On mine, it looks like a little sun. And there's a small sun to make it darker, and there's a big sun to make it brighter. Is that what you guys all have on yours as well? Okay, so I'm going to, it says that this is too bright. I'm going to hit just one click to drop it down, and you can see now that the new readout is 141. And I said that I want you guys to have this value between 120 and 140. This is pretty close, but I'm going to hit one more time and make sure. That goes down to a 117. In my opinion, this 140, the little brighter one right here, that 141 is a much better place to be. It's much closer to it. But how bright is my screen right now? So you take out your phone, you click on your camera, you hand this to somebody and say, when I tell you to, shoot a picture of this screen, will you? Are you ready? Okay, I'm going to make it darker once, which is the wrong setting. All right, here we go. As soon as I hit this button, when that thing comes up, shoot a picture. Hit it. You get it? How many little squares do I have? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've got 11 little squares. That's how my brightness should be. Does that make sense what I just did? I know. How pathetic, right? So again, I've been working, I've made my computer brighter, darker, I've been working, whatever, blah, 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 and I come back to my computer and I want to work in a calibrated state. I take it all the way down and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And I am back at the right brightness that I should be. Now, how janky is that? But it works. And again, I've done this for years, and I have never found anybody. I used to actually count them really quickly, which is a real pain in the ass because you can never get past. You're like, what'd you do? What'd you do? What'd you do? No, wait, okay, I'll do the dark ones. No. Anyway. Only the real stuff here, guys. Okay, so this is now set at the right brightness, so then I'm going to go to hit next. And now what happens, this is where we go into 3-pass. The first thing that's happening right now is it's going to try to get my monitor to be, I've set the brightness of it, and the gamma of it is already built in, because I set that as also the software has already established that. So now what it's going to try to do is it's going to try to give me that white point. It's going to try to give me that D65. Now, it's not dealing with color yet. It's strictly trying to get to a neutral screen so that when my screen is asking for neutral, that there is no color cast to it. So that's the first pass. Then the second pass, once it gets there, that's calibration. When it gets there, it does a second pass, that's profiling. And again, it's going to throw up all of these numbers. So right now, it's kicking out all of these colors. That puck is measuring all those colors, and it's trying to come up with the difference that exists between the two. Remember the example that we had on the board yesterday, or day before yesterday? Is everybody comfortable with this? Again, I'm looking for the bias in this monitor, and I want to build a profile that removes the bias and gives me the exact color. My screen is showing me the exact color that's being called for. And if all of us do this, all of our screens will show us the exact same thing. You could line them all up and they would all look the same. Make sense? Okay. So then the final pass that it does is it does a check. It does a verification. So in the final pass, it actually loads the profile and it runs this again to see if things worked out the way that they were supposed to work out. Make sense? Okay.
How did you get the squares in the picture? Is that like an
It's
iPhone
all in the
thing?
software. Oh, wait, the brightness things?
Yeah. Oh, is that using the phone app?
No. So, come to your screen, you don't have to just do your brightness controls. Right? That little thing right there. I just took a picture of that.
But didn't you say you saw squares in the picture?
It's those little squares. Hit your brightness again.
Oh,
It's those little squares.
Okay.
I realize they're not really squares, but. Makes sense? Yeah, I know.
Can I add something?
Anything.
Don't change the brightness in the room when you do this because it's gonna just change the profile. And the profile will be wrong.
I'm sorry. I had no idea what my phone was just doing to me. So, I asked me that again.
I just said don't change the light in the room when you're doing it
Yes.
because it's gonna change the profile of the image.
Would you recommend doing it like in the dark?
No, actually that's not true. As long as you've got all of those things cut off, this is a closed system right here, so it's not what's happening on here. There's no reflection, should be able to actually get in here. So, this is, again, just an odd question, but I'm going to throw it off to you guys anyway. If you want to shoot through glass, but you don't want any reflection, how do you do that? So what? Put a red on the glass, exactly. If you're really smart, you'll actually put on a rubber lens shade so that the rubber actually, almost it sucks to the glass because it will prevent any reflection from being able to come in. Now, glass has got two sides to it though, so you'll eliminate the reflection off the closest side. You may still get some small reflection off the inside, and that may be the case here, but I would guess it would be so minor. But, I think Jay brings up a really good point. I don't know that I would really be doing this in the brightest room. I don't know that I would do this outside in bright sunlight. I would, why? I think it would work, but why push it, right? Okay, so then a little thing that comes up and it says, okay, take that little thing and put it back in place so that it protects it. And it says, okay. And we're going to click on next. Actually, let me show you this really quick. These are the befores and afters. So the before is the color that was asked for, the after is the color that was given. So look at the difference in these. You know, some of these are pretty spot on, but look at the difference here. This is what was asked for, this is what was given. Asked for, given, asked for, given. How the fuck can you color correct when you are getting lied to that badly? Does this make sense? Alright, so I'm going to hit next. And you have a chance to name your profile. And you need to name your profile something that is meaningful, something to you. Do not call it color LCD. You will end up with 1,000 of those, and you'll have no idea which one is really the one that you should be using. So for me, I'm going to name mine my MacBook Pro _VER. I always give my profiles my initials, because there's people who will come along and do the exact same profile naming convention, and I don't know the difference, which one was mine, which one wasn't mine. If it's on my computer, I know I'm the only one doing it on my computer, but if it's on like a school computer or a class computer or a computer in the digital lab, whatever, who knows, right? So anyway, I do that part, so underscore, and then I give it a date, 201908. Today's the 10th. Yep. This is going to tell me that I can put it at my user level or at the system level. It's saying that that's not writable right now. The user level on this part is fine. It also gives you a place here to set a profile reminder. If you want to, you can actually set up the software to bug the shit out of you to profile your computer again, or to calibrate and profile your computer again. When you're first trying to get into the habit of doing this, that's probably not a bad thing to actually do. And again, the software gives you an opportunity to allow your computer to monitor the ambient light and change the profile based on the ambient light. You want to make sure that that is left to off. And then finally, we're going to hit create and save the profile. And now it'll give you a whole way to compare these things. I don't really care about the whole way of comparing these things, but I do want to show this to you guys. I can't show it to you on the screen because the screen is actually using the profile for that projector, but I can show it to you here. So I need everybody to come over here really quickly to see my screen. I'm going to quit this. I'm going to undo this guy. I'm going to come up to my Finder, up to the little Apple menu guy, System Preferences. Inside of System Preferences, go to Displays. Now again, I've got two of these because I've got one for the projector and one for me, but this is my built-in Retina display right here. You would go to Color, and by default, the thing that we just made should be what is already selected right here. And I always go in and make sure that it's actually picked the right thing. It's supposed to be all automatic, but it's just a good quick check. So this is my profile, this is my screen, what it looks like at the correct brightness and in the correct color. This is what Apple sends me out of the box. Any change, notice any change in that? Look at this. This is where we are, where's today? 09, 08, 10, right there. Huh. You can't ever get predictable color if you don't work in a color calibrated world. You're guessing at everything. And the tragedy is that then you're printing out print after print after print, and you're trying to guess that, oh, well, my print looks too red, or my print looks too green, and then I got to do another one, whatever. I told you guys, I don't do test strips. I was doing some mural printing, and somebody said, you want to see this test strip? And I was like, why? Are we good on this? Are there questions about this? All right, let's get back at it. Let's do this, guys. I've got 1/4 right now. Let's go ahead and take a break right now. Be back at 10:30. We are going to go grab cameras. Oh, is everybody downloaded Capture One demo? Yeah, is anybody not? Okay, please go ahead. Can you set it up right now? So again, to get there, go to just do Capture One, PTURE1 Pro. And you can probably put in download. And just click on Capture One, download, and make sure you find the trial version of it. So it's 30-day free trial right here. And the one you want to download is the Capture One Pro, not the Capture One Pro Fuji or the Capture One Pro for Sony. Just do the regular one. Just click on that download and we should be good to go. So we need to go very fast.
Really? Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Do you want to check all this?
Yeah, you're good. Yep, that's fine. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Just hit next.
Like if I adjust the brightness when I'm watching the video, like not when I'm editing,
Right.
and I put it back.
Oh yeah. You can put it. Yeah. You can do anything you want. It's just when you decide to do. So your screen's actually a little on the dark side.
So I used to like just remove the stuff.
That's true. Perfect. Right. So that then you need to grab a picture of however many of those little. How bright is your brightness?
Right.
Don't worry, you can do it. No, you can do it after the fact, but you know you got so click it up one and back to the other one just so that you can go. Yeah. Yeah, it's problematic, but yes.
So I'm having this software update. So Capture One.
Okay, so do Capture One 11 instead of this. They have older software. So go back to their download page. And scroll down a little bit. Go down, scroll up again. It's looking for support. Software. And let's try to capture that. So it's not track. And try. Keep going down. Let's go to the last version of 11. Try this guy right here. You see what come into your app. Just go to it and come about that map. And run these up. I applaud the fact that you don't update your system like to the latest greatest all the time because it's a world of hurt. But the one that you're on, you should know, is one of the worst that Apple ever released. So you might want to consider going up just one step. Yeah.
Sorry, it's just out of hobby.
Yeah, I'm having the same problem.
It won't load.
I just know I'm not updated enough.
That's fine. Then go to, because you can just download an older version. Everything that we're going to do will be the same. So go to all the way to the top of this, go to their support page, and scroll down, and go to their software archive. Yeah. And scroll down. Click on installers for Mac. And scroll down. If you're looking for the last, because these are all versions as well. If you're looking for the last stable version 11, down click that. Did that load? Oh, did that load? You know, it did work. Yeah.
Are we going to get authorized to use any of that?
We're going to go through that right now, so I'm hoping that you're going to all get authorized to use cameras today.
Yeah, there's like there's the camera DVD, but like I'm wondering if we authorized to use Sony.
To do a Sony? Sure. Sure. Let's not tackle that first thing this morning, but I'll be more than happy if you want to. We can actually you can check that out maybe during lunch or something. We'll get it so we can find it sometime. Are you guys all checked out yet on 5D Mark II or 5D Mark III or whatever the 5Ds they have here? Is anyone not? Okay. I just means I don't have to check you out.
I read your file on naming conventions.
Yes.
Do you recommend the underscores versus the like spacer?
And it doesn't, neither one, they're both legal, it doesn't matter. But I'm glad you brought that up, because I think we should actually go through that before we actually go through this, because we're gonna use it for this. So, yeah, that part doesn't matter. There are a whole string of illegal characters that do matter, though, so, yeah. Those you want to avoid.
For the Capture One video, they used like the spaces instead of the underscore. There
You
was-
mean like the hyphens, or they actually use spaces?
Or,
Like an empty
yeah,
space?
the hyphens.
Yeah. Because the empty space it's as long as you keep your stuff local on a computer like this, it's not a problem. But the minute you go to upload that to a Unix server, if there's a space in there, it'll reject everything. It doesn't, it's illegal.